Hey everybody, Ty here with another video here today. Now, for those of you that are regulars, you know it's the last day of the month, new month ahead. Let's go ahead and look at the final outlook for September here this time. And to anyone that might have watched the last video about a week or so ago at this point now, what I really want you to pay attention to, and if to anyone that's interested, you can check the tab for that last video. The most notable change that we have had here, because this is really just an update video, is the temperature map. So I'm gonna sneak my poorly drawn thumbnail, and I apologize with those, but I'm not an artist here, and I don't know how to use AI to make my own thumbnails, especially for stuff like this. But fact of the matter is here, major, and I mean major change here, because in the last one, the outlook showed most of the lower 48 expected to be above average here, and look how much of the map now has flipped. We have a very much smaller area in comparison to what we had before. It's almost kind of mind-blowing. My jaw kind of dropped, honestly, when I first looked at this, if I'm being completely honest. But pretty much, with the exception of the northern plains and part of the northern Rockies in particular, parts of the Southwest even, are really the only areas that we're expected to see above average here, and then parts of Alaska as well. Now, of course, there aren't really like any areas that are expected to be below average in the outlook here, which does indicate that a little further down the line, we're going to kind of bounce back from this little cold snap that we've been dealing with over a large part of the country right now. But this is a clear indicator as well that that cold snap is going to be pretty persistent over the next few weeks. Is going to be a big factor as we head into those first couple weeks of September here. So if you're enjoying the weather, great. If you're not, sorry. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but it's going to be persistent here. Me personally, I'm not complaining because I work outside, in case any of you don't know. But one thing that has changed a little bit as well is also the precip outlook. And I mean, it's not significant changes that I've seen here. It's more so just little minute details. The Gulf Coast, for the most part, has remained pretty active here in the outlook, and a little bit more confidence has increased towards the Florida Peninsula, but nothing to be surprised at. I think the biggest change really at this point has been over towards the central U.S. I have been looking at some long range models that have even suggested maybe some potential for severe weather, but we're still a long ways out on that, so I'm not trying to read too much into that. But the pattern definitely does indicate a little bit of an increase in activity over here, especially over towards the eastern plains or east central plains, and then heading into the Midwest here. Over towards the Northwest here, not much has really changed. There has been a slight increase in the area overall for above average precip potential, and then there is a tiny little area. It's kind of hard to see because it has the above tag above it, above and above. But anyway, you can see if you look really close, I'm going to zoom in so you can get a better view of it. You can see a small area of increased probability popping up there where we're getting into that 40 to 50 percentile here. So it does look like we're going to have a relatively active pattern. Before, we actually did have an area where we had below average precip chances. That has also since faded. So some big changes going on. Now, one thing that I have made note of, and I'm going to show this in a little bit more detail, is we've been set to kind of be on the edge of maybe a neutral Enzo into a La Nina, and we talked about this in prior videos as well. But if we were to actually go ahead and take a look at that Enzo right now, and I'm going to go ahead and pull up the ocean analysis for you. Look at that. You can actually see that we're pretty far under the La Nina threshold here, which would be negative 0.5 degrees Celsius. We're at negative 0.8 here. Now, this varies in different areas of the Pacific, and usually it's through the mean that we end up getting our final number here. But it's notably different because look at this. This one's even more extreme over here. This is the Nino 3. We have the Nino 1 and 2 here as well. The Nino's kind of the Nino 1 and 2 is kind of fluctuating a bit. And then we have Nino 4 and this one's kind of fluctuating a bit here. This one's the only one that's still remaining in that neutral phase, so it does look like that shift may be happening a little bit sooner than expected, and we are seeing the effects as a result here. Now, this is pretty well reflected in our oscillations here that we've been looking at. Particularly, we have a negative AO phase and definitely a strong negative NAO phase, so we're seeing that cold air kind of retreat to the south a little bit, or push to the south here a bit, and then also kind of moving off to the east with the current pattern that we have in play here. The pressure's a little bit lighter out here towards the or the pressure's a little bit stronger over here. You have a stronger jet stream as well. I do think that as we go further down the line, this even sets the stage for some stronger storm potential, of course, as I mentioned before. Now, we end up staying in a relatively persistent negative trend with both of these oscillations. The AO is a little bit more variable, but the NAO is continuing to show a pretty consistent signal all the way up towards maybe the back half of the month. So some of these outlooks that we're seeing for fall may even end up changing before all is said and done. The first month here has already kind of been, I wouldn't necessarily say completely thrown out the window, but it has definitely changed significantly. So the thing when we make these little subtle shifts from neutral Enzo to La Nina are always a big factor in what we end up seeing. So a lot of mysteries still lie ahead with our weather pattern here in the long range. But at least over these first couple of weeks, it does look like the fall preview may actually end up turning into fall weather here, so to speak. Because meteorological fall technically starts tomorrow, and the official equinox starts on the 22nd. So let's go ahead and take a look at the exact values that we may end up seeing as a result of these changes that we have here. We still see some pretty significant temperatures over towards the northwest here in regards to our above average temperatures. This is the only place that's really going to be seasonably or unseasonably warm, I should say. And it could be pretty significant. I would say that we could be about 15 to 20, maybe even 30 degrees above average here for this first week here. Keep in mind that this is only really showing the average throughout the day, but not particularly the entire week here. So there are a lot of variable pieces to this puzzle here. Now, the most notable area where we're expected to be below average is over towards the Midwest and Ohio Valley here, where we could see temperatures at about maybe 15, maybe even 20 degrees below average, which is pretty significant if I were to say so myself. We go into that following week, some of that cold air is going away a bit, and we do have some warm air beginning to dominate out towards the west. This is that positive PNA setup that I've been talking about in prior weeks leading up to the event. And we still end up seeing a considerable sign for this as the cold air even starts to fade here at this point. But even as we go above average towards the eastern half of the U.S., it looks like we stay relatively consistent or close to average here. At most, some of these areas could be about maybe 5-10 degrees above average. Some areas could be pushing 15, like over towards the Mississippi Delta. But again, that warm air really seems to persist over towards the western states, especially the northwestern states. By the time we get towards the end of the month, we kind of level off a little bit. Everybody's above average here, but not by a significant amount unless you're up towards the northern states. But you have to keep in mind is you have to know what your average temperature is before you start panicking, saying that, oh my God, it's going to be 90 degrees. Even with this being as strong of a signal as it is, I wouldn't say that we're going to have 90-degree days here. I think some high 70s and a few 80s, maybe even mid 80s are possible. Wouldn't rule out a 90, but I would consider it a little bit more on the unlikely side at this point. Everybody at this point does look like they're going to be starting to cool down from this juncture. So the next thing that I'm going to be paying close attention to, particularly, and I don't know why I had that up, is also the MJO, because this is going to affect our moisture setup over the lower 48 as well. And I want you to pay attention to, of course, the tropics, the region over here towards the monsoon, which is the southwest here, and then just off the east coast here. So the one thing that we have to remember when it comes to the tropics is that we're in peak hurricane season. So while we have done well to not really have any issue with storms, the season isn't done yet. And this is usually when the season is most active. And then look at this little stripe right here where we have the enhanced rainfall phase. That does lead me to think that more development will be possible towards a couple of different regions here. And at least towards the short range, if we were to go ahead and take a look at the lower 48, the monsoon region is very active, but everywhere else is relatively dry. But as we go further along here, especially as we get later into the month, things do kind of shift a bit. The MJO does put the main development region in a dry phase, so I do think things will start to slow down with the tropics. Meanwhile, over the lower 48, we're kind of more in the variable side of things. So as a result, there could be an increase in moisture as we get into the long range, but right now in the short range, we're still kind of scratching our heads here as to what the final outcome could be with that. And then as we take a look at what those specific values will look like over particular regions, of course, most of my data is kind of backed up with the southwest or the monsoon area kind of really picking up over those first couple weeks. So we get towards the back half of the month, we kind of level off a bit. Northwest starts to pick up. And then over towards the Florida Peninsula, maybe sneaking into parts of the Southeast is where things begin to pick up to close out the month, sneaking into August from there. So with us being in the phase that we are in right now, let's go ahead and take a look at what the overall jet stream pattern could be too, and how this equates with the moisture that we have set up now in play here. So let's go ahead and move this forward. And as we go scan by scan here, it's also the first time we've gotten pivotal weather to work here. And one thing I also want to make note of here, the CFS is not the most reliable in the long range here. So the further out we get, don't read into this too much. The fact in the matter is, we do have an increase in moisture over here as we get towards that first week in September, and it only kind of picks up from there. There is more troughing that seems to be present over towards the northern states in particular, which is where most of that cold air is going to linger, especially in the long range. And then as time goes on, you can even see the storms kind of following along in this similar pattern there as well. Eventually though, as we begin to see more of a shift occur in the medium range here, we start to see the deep south getting into the action here. The monsoon region still is persistent even as we get towards the end of the month, but we do start to see a little drop off there. Now, some interesting stuff to make note of, and it's not necessarily linked to the lower 48, it's the fact that we're seeing some potential. And keep in mind, like I said, this isn't the most effective model in the long range, especially considering the fact that we're looking over 600 hours out, and I rarely ever look at this range for a particular reason. Pretty sure you guys know, but fact in the matter is, with the cold air continuing to kind of funnel in like it could lead to some potential for snow north of the border here. So it's a pretty significant change. It's a pretty bold forecast model run that I'm seeing here, but definitely something that's piquing my interest as we get towards the back end of the month and maybe further beyond. I think at this point, not just with this month, but maybe October could be an open canvas, and maybe even the start of winter could be pretty significant. But we'll have to see how things play out from here. But from this point, I would gather that we're set for a relatively average and intriguing September, I would say, at this point. But in any case, I appreciate you all being here. That's all I really got for this one. We're gonna try to put up a regular forecast video tomorrow. That's really where the struggles have been with uploading recently. The computers have not been quite working right, or really more of the websites. But I do think we have a solution for that there. But that being said, everyone take care. Have a wonderful rest of your Sunday, and I'll see you tomorrow.